The camera opens on a flashbulb storm, red carpet noise, cameras firing, strangers shouting a name that isn't even a name. It's a persona. Lady Gaga steps forward like a living headline, and the world decides instantly what she is: shocking, fearless, outrageous. But here's the truth. This story keeps hiding in plain sight. The most extreme version of Gaga wasn't created to provoke you. It was created to protect her. Because before she was an icon, she was a young musician trying to survive a city and an industry that punish ordinary. In pop culture, we love the myth of overnight success. But with Gaga, the overnight moment was built on years of rejection, late-night gigs, relentless writing, and a private question that can break an artist. If the world won't accept the real me, how loud does the costume have to be? This video makes a bet with you. By the end, you won't just remember the controversial outfits or the viral performances. You'll understand the mechanism underneath them, how a woman built a character called Gaga to take the hits for her, while the real person absorbed the pain offstage. And you'll see how fame doesn't just magnify talent. It magnifies every wound, every fear, every moment your body begs you to stop. So before we talk about the biggest songs, the backlash and the comeback, we have to go back to the beginning, back to Stefani, before the mask, before the monster, before the world learned to chant Gaga, and she learned what it costs to answer every single time. Before the world knew her as Lady Gaga, she was Stefani Angelina Germanotta, a kid growing up in New York City, surrounded by the constant noise and ambition of a place that never lets you forget there's always someone better, louder, faster. She was born there on March 28, 1986, and that detail matters, not as trivia, but as context. New York doesn't raise you gently. It raises you like a spotlight, bright, immediate, unforgiving. Music entered her life early, and not in a future pop star way, more like an instinct. Piano, practice, repetition, the private comfort of getting something right when the world feels chaotic. While other kids learn how to blend in, she learned how to perform. And performance became more than talent. It became identity, a way to be seen, a way to control the room, a way to turn nerves into power. As a teenager, that intensity didn't fade. It sharpened. She pushed deeper into music and stagecraft, eventually earning early admission to NYU Tisch School of the Arts to study music. But here's where the story gets interesting. She didn't stay long. She left school to chase the only thing that felt real enough to match her ambition, building a life in music on her own terms. And that decision is the first real clue to everything that comes later. Because leaving safety behind isn't just bravery, it's hunger. It's the belief that if you can't fit into the world as it is, you'll invent a new way to exist inside it. But New York doesn't reward raw hunger. It tests you. It throws you into small stages, late nights, and rooms where no one cares who you are until you give them a reason. And soon, Stefani would discover a brutal truth. To survive the industry, she might need more than a voice. She might need a character strong enough to take the impact. At some point, Stefani stopped trying to win rooms by being good. She started trying to win them by being unforgettable. Because in the music world, talent is common, identity is rare. And for a young songwriter grinding through New York's late nights, the industry's message can feel brutally simple. If you look like everyone else, you'll be treated like everyone else. So she built a character strong enough to carry the ambition. The stage name Lady Gaga wasn't just a catchy alias. It was a boundary line between the private person and the public battlefield, inspired by Radio Gaga by Queen. The early grind became strategic. She wrote constantly, performed relentlessly, and learned what most artists learn the hard way. If the door won't open, you don't wait politely. You build a new entrance. That persistence started paying off when she began getting industry attention as a songwriter. And then the key escalation happened. After hearing her sing, Akon signed her to his Con Live imprint, connecting her to the machinery that could actually launch a pop career. Then the montage goes fast, because it really did. Studio sessions, tight deadlines, a new sound built for clubs and radios at the same time. And finally, the moment the world could no longer treat her as a weird underground act. The fame arrived in 2008, and its lead single Just Dance became the ignition point. The song didn't just introduce a voice, it introduced a world, glossy, theatrical, provocative, and engineered to spread. But here's the hidden tension inside that breakthrough. The more the Gaga persona worked, the more people assumed it was a gimmick, something she wore for attention, not something she built for survival. And once the public decides you're the shocking one, they stop letting you be anything else. Because the next chapter isn't only about success, it's about what happens when an artist becomes a symbol, and the world starts trying to own the symbol. When the fame made her unavoidable, Gaga faced a new problem. The world didn't just want songs, it wanted a symbol, and symbols don't get to have quiet days. Every time she stepped on stage, people expected a moment, as if artistry had to arrive with a shockwave attached. That pressure helped shape the Born This Way era, the point where she wasn't only selling pop, she was selling permission. The title track landed like a self-empowerment anthem, bold enough to become a rallying cry and controversial enough to spark constant debate about influence, originality, and intent. Even major critics noted how her provocation invited comparisons to earlier pop giants, turning the conversation into a culture fight instead of a music discussion. When you reach that scale, you stop being reviewed like a musician and start being judged like an argument. Commercially, the era hit with undeniable force. Born This Way stormed the Billboard 200 at number 1, with over 1 million copies sold in its first week, proving that her message wasn't niche, it was mainstream. And the single debuted at number 1 on the Hot 100, an entry so rare it felt like the whole planet pressing play at once. But the higher she climbed, the more complicated the backlash became. Some people wanted her to stay the weird club girl, others demanded she become a moral spokesperson. Fans treated her as a protector, critics treated her as a threat. And in the middle of it all was a human being trying to hold the line between performance and identity, between what she believed and what the crowd demanded she represent. Because when your art becomes a flag, everyone starts tugging on it. And Gaga was about to make one of the most polarizing statements of her career, an image so extreme it would swallow the conversation whole.
By the time Gaga reached her cultural peak, she wasn't just releasing music, she was communicating in symbols. And when you choose symbolism as your language, you don't get to control who translates it. That's where the controversies begin, not as random stunts, but as collisions between intention and interpretation, between an artist trying to say something big and a media ecosystem trained to reduce everything to a headline. The clearest example is still the one people argue about years later, the raw meat dress at the 2010 MTV Video Music Awards, a look literally made from beef, designed by Frank Fernandez and styled by Nicola Formichetti. It detonated instantly. Animal rights groups condemned it, critics called it desperate, and the internet turned it into a punchline before most people even asked what it meant. But Gaga insisted it wasn't random shock. She tied the message to protest, specifically linking it to the U.S. military's "don't ask, don't tell" policy, and framing the outfit as a statement about what happens when people's rights are treated as negotiable. Whether someone agreed or not, the key point is this: the dress turned Gaga into a battleground. Suddenly, the debate wasn't about her music. It was about morality, politics, taste, and who gets to decide what art is allowed to look like. And here's the trap. Once the public decides your identity is provocation, you lose the ability to be interpreted any other way. If you show up understated, they say you've lost it. If you show up extreme, they say you're trying too hard. Either way, you're no longer a person. You're a narrative that other people feel entitled to control. The press treats it like sport, genius or gimmick, icon or attention seeker, as if the only two options for a woman in pop are saint or spectacle. That's why the controversy matters beyond the outfit. It shows the mechanics of modern fame. Outrage equals oxygen. Every argument keeps you trending. Every trend demands a bigger moment. And the artist, stuck inside the loop, becomes addicted to the very spotlight that's quietly burning them. Because while the world fought over what Gaga wore, something more serious was building off stage. Something you can't clap for, can't cancel, and can't outperform: the body's limit. After the controversy cycle, the most dangerous lie is the quiet one. If I slow down, I disappear. When you've trained the world to expect a moment every time you breathe, rest starts feeling like failure. And that's where Gaga's rebuild becomes less about image and more about survival, because the body eventually forces the conversation the headlines refuse to have. In Gaga, 5'2", the camera doesn't chase spectacle. It watches the cost, the tension between the artist who can command a stadium and the person who still has to wake up inside a human body. The documentary follows her through the making of Joanne, the pressure of preparation, and the emotional whiplash of being on for everyone while dealing with chronic pain tied to fibromyalgia. And chronic pain doesn't behave like a scandal. You can't outperform it. You can't PR your way around it. In 2017, the strain became public in the most concrete way. Tour plans were postponed, and later canceled dates were announced due to severe physical pain related to fibromyalgia, with statements emphasizing the need to prioritize recovery. The shift is subtle but profound. The industry loves endurance, but the body has no interest in your brand strategy. At the same time, Gaga began speaking more openly about mental health, including PTSD, another layer of pain the public can't see on a red carpet. Put those together, and the rebuild starts to look less like a comeback arc and more like a redesign of her life. Fewer automatic yeses, more boundaries, and a new definition of strength that isn't measured in how much you can push through. Because the real victory isn't returning louder. It's returning with control, choosing when to be visible and when to protect the person behind the persona. And then, just when it seemed like Gaga might step away from the spotlight to heal, she did something that changed the conversation entirely. She walked into a role that made the world see her not as an image, but as an artist. Then came the pivot that rewired how the world talked about her. In A Star Is Born, she didn't hide behind spectacle. She let the camera sit close enough to catch the quiet truth. Vulnerability can be louder than provocation. The performance wasn't just a pop star acting. It was an artist proving she could hold a story without armor. And when Shallow landed, it didn't feel like a hit engineered for charts. It felt like a crack in the mask where a real voice could finally breathe. That's the legacy people miss if they only remember the controversies. Gaga didn't shock because she had nothing else. She shocked because she understood the brutal math of attention, and she refused to let that math erase her message. Over time, the persona became less of a cage and more of a tool, a way to fight for outsiders, to build community, to turn pain into language. Even her work with Born This Way Foundation reinforces the same thesis. The character can open doors, but the person has to walk through them. Now loop back to the opening image, cameras flashing, crowds roaring, and the twist finally lands. Lady Gaga was never the disguise. It was the shield that made survival possible.